Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Ronan Murphy, and for another Transfers podcast extra, I'm delighted to be joined by Uli Hesse, the author of Tor, the story of German football, biographies on, or histories on Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, a fantastic book on Franz Beckenbauer, The Three Lives of Der Kaiser, which I'd highly recommend. It's out in English, obviously, as well. So, yeah, welcome to the show, Uli. How are things?
Ronan, thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. And
we've just signed Bellingham, or I think we're about to. I don't think it's been finalized now, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah. So Bellingham at Borussia Dortmund, Jobe Bellingham at Borussia Dortmund for 2025-26, but back in 2020, Borussia Dortmund signed the other Jude Bellingham, so that's what this Transfers podcast extra is here to talk about. Yeah, the other Bellingham, the first Bellingham, the trailblazer Bellingham, but hopefully for your sake as a Borussia Dortmund fan and Borussia Dortmund fans, the second Bellingham may be even better.
That's hard to believe for a number of reasons. The main reason, of course, being that his brother is so good. Was so good from day one on, and has become even better. That's, I think, we could talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, so Jude Bellingham, from a young age, he was taught that he was going to be brilliant. He made his England under-15 debut when he was aged 13, back in December 2016. In that game, actually, he played alongside Jamal Musiala, Germany international, played in that game for England under-15s, as well as American international Yunus Musa and future England internationals Tino Livramento, Morgan Rogers and Cole Palmer. So what a field of talent that was back in 2016. So whoever knows how these kids are going to make it. But even back then, kind of Borussia Dortmund were aware of him. They had watched him play for England under-15s. Their chief scout, Marcus Palawa, he went to watch Birmingham City reserves. He went to see him play for, and he spoke to me for a feature that I did for Goal back in 2020, I think. No, it was 2021 before the Euros, it would have been, and he was saying that he caught their eye even then, playing for England under 15s, and they knew how good he would be, that he was this kind of skinny guy, but it wasn't his physical presence, it was just everything about him that you could tell by watching him that this guy was going to be good. And Dortmund didn't try to sign him then. He went on to Birmingham, he stayed at Birmingham City, he turned down Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Man United, Arsenal. Back in 2019, then he became Birmingham City's youngest ever player. So I'd say you weren't aware of him at this time. It was probably not till later that you yourself became aware of Jude Bellingham, how good he would be.
Well, that was at a time when this was our business model, sort of the club's business model. So when you were a Dortmund supporter at the time, or following the club or whatever, around all those years, let's say basically maybe the last couple of club years until very recently, maybe you want to talk about that later, I don't know, until maybe 2 years ago, it was just, we would normally sign one or two outstanding young players every year, and some would work, some would not, or we would loan them out. There was all these examples that people know about, like, Haaland, of course, and then Bellingham and Jadon Sancho and whatever. But there were lots more. There was Pulisic before them. There was Dembele, who we talked about, I think. There was, in the Champions League final, we saw Hakimi. He came here as a 19-year-old. We could have kept him. We didn't for whatever reason, and so on. So, around that time, it sort of became de rigueur for a Dortmund fan to look at the newspaper and see which young player we're linked with, And so we'd read the name Bellingham a couple of times before we actually signed him. But of course, nobody of us had ever seen him. We didn't really know how good he was. But at that time, there was a really good chance that if we sign a player, if we really pursue him, he's probably very, very good.
Yeah.
So we all expected him to be good, but not that good. Or let me be more precise, not that good so quickly.
Yes.
Because he basically became a regular in his first year.
Yeah, at that time he'd already played for Birmingham City for so much. He had become their youngest player, their youngest goal scorer. Before his debut, he had been asking his coaches to play him in different positions for the academy team so he could kind of learn and improve his all-round game. He was kind of so motivated. And yeah, back in 2021, 2020, I think even for a different feature, I spoke to Mike Dodds, who's now the Wycombe Wanderers manager, but was then Birmingham City's kind of head of academy. And he was saying that he was different to all the other kids because at that age, all the other kids have started to be turned their head away from football and being distracted by girls and other things that are going on in their lives. But he was saying that he never lost the bug. And I quote him here: sometimes when they become teenagers, they get Kevin and Perry syndrome, where you have to drag things out of them. But he still played and loved the game as a 16-year-old, as he did as the 7-year-old. And you could kind of tell watching him from Birmingham City that he kind of loved playing football and he enjoyed playing football, and this was what his life was. And then in January 2020, Duncan Castles, on the previous version of this podcast, the Transfer Window podcast, talked to confirm multiple offers for Jude Bellingham, including a £30 million bid from Man United for a 16-year-old at the time. So that was crazy. There was loads of teams linked with him. And then in summer 2020, Sir Alex Ferguson brings around Carrington to try and show what Man United can offer. But Borussia Dortmund had the most to offer because himself and his father, Mark, kind of wanted the team to fit best for his development. And that was Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean, it's we had a reputation at that time. Maybe we still do. That we're a really good club for that type of young player, because we will give you playing time, and we will give you playing time at the highest level. So I think that's one of the major attractions for all these, for the Hollands and the Bellinghams and the Dembélés and everything, and the Jadon Sanchos, who know that one day they're going to earn a lot of money at some Premier League club. But how do we get there? And I think they also know that if we sign for, I don't know, City or United too early, we're going to spend a lot of time in the reserves, on the bench or whatever. And that's not the case at Dortmund. Plus, add to this, 80,000 people every second weekend. So that's always been the major selling point of Dortmund. And I think that's obviously why he decided to join Dortmund.
Yeah, he said that in his press conference, or the kind of notes given out to the media when he signed it. The record Dortmund have got with young players in recent years is unrivaled in European football. Yeah. Weighing all that up, and the people we met there, the stadium and their fan base, made me fall in love with that club as well. When I was speaking to Dortmund kind of around that time, and they said that one of the reasons that Dortmund were able to win the race for Bellingham is the fact that they had been watching him since he was 15. They had been in contact with his family since he was 15. This is the kind of the way they operate. It wasn't just, he's playing great in the championship, he's a young guy, let's sign him. No, they've been kind of scouting him for years, and that's their approach around the club. They're always kind of looking for the next Sancho or the next Reina or the next Pulisic or Haaland or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a reputation. I don't know if it's still the case, for having a really, really good scouting department. And and everything they promised him came true. I mean, he became, I think he still is, I don't know, but at least he became Dortmund's youngest Champions League goal scorer, and shortly after the transfer. So he did play in the Champions League from day one, which is incredible for a 17-year-old, right? But of course, he's not a normal 17-year-old. That was one of those things. Another things about Dortmund and young players is you mentioned, you just said that even when he was an academy player, he was one of those players who would not get distracted by, I don't know, girls, money, whatever, cars or these things. And we've become quite used to the fact that when we sign a young player, it will take some time for him to adapt to everything, because he will be young. He will be away from home, maybe for the first time. He will be on his own in a different country, different language and everything. And it will take some time for him, to learn some discipline. And I mean, Dembele and Sancho, they all had their discipline problems. But Bellingham never had, at least as far as I know. He was always very, very focused on the football, from day one. So he was very professional. He was actually here. He was old beyond his years when he arrived. Maybe still is, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so on his debut then he became the club's youngest goal scorer. He scored after just 30 minutes in the cup. He won Bundesliga Rookie of the Month. He made his Bundesliga debut the week after making his debut in the cup. He had an incredible first season at Borussia Dortmund, 46 games, 4 goals. He won the Pokal. He won Newcomer of the Season as voted by the other players in the Bundesliga, so he won the respect of everybody else in the Bundesliga that season, and he was the runner-up in the Copa trophy to Pedri, the second best young player in Europe that season. So yeah, everything went right for him in that first season at Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, and it was that was the one thing that we hadn't expected, that he would be so consistently good, and he also had this, two things which are very unusual in such a young player. He had this authority on the field. Part of it was, of course, his physique. He's a very athletic player, but he had this authority, even though there were all these older players around him. And the other was his decision making, which is quite unusual for such a young player. He was, I wouldn't say he was faultless, but it was really, like I said, he became a regular. He became a key player even. Very quickly, very early. Also because of his position, playing in defensive midfield, there was a lot of responsibility, but he shouldered it, and he became very popular. And it was just quickly the dream transfer for everybody involved.
Yeah, the second season was very good. He had more goals, 44 games. The Borussia Dortmund finished runners up in that season, but he had a kind of a few disappointing spots in that season. The final day of the season, obviously he missed through a knee injury, and then Borussia Dortmund could only draw with Mainz, and a win would have guaranteed him the title, so that was disappointing. But as well as that, there was comments after the Bayern Munich defeat where he wasn't a big fan of the referee, and he made reference to previous match fixing allegations, which did not go down well with the German Football Association.
Yeah, which was number one, of course, just fans like that, because, for obvious reasons, Bayern Munich are not the most beloved club in the land, and usually there was another. Well, it was also one of those moments where suddenly he was a young player, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. He'd been so reserved all the time, he'd been so perfect on the pitch and so disciplined and everything. So it was kind of, in a way, it was refreshing, to see him just, lose his composure and just lash out at the referee. He must have picked that up in the dressing room, that talk about this particular referee had been a minor figure in the big refereeing scandal around the referee Robert Heuser a couple of years earlier. So he must have picked that up in the dressing room, or maybe there was another thing. Fans love to have conspiracy theories about referees and always lash out at referees during the game. And it was sort of the moment where we realized, hey, the players are the same. They must have looked at the sheet before the game and said, "Oh no, Felix Zweier is refereeing. He can be a bit, I don't know." And so, yeah. But of course, as you said, this didn't sit well with the authorities, and in his young age didn't help him there. He had to pay a fine, and
yeah, I suppose it could have been worse than a fine, but
yeah.
The Transfers podcast is running an audience survey at the moment. If you have a few minutes to fill it in, please do, and give us your thoughts on the show and guide us on ways in which we can improve it and bring you better content going forward. The link is in the show notes and also on our social media platforms.
So in the 2022-23 season, that was the season that Borussia Dortmund came second on the last day of the season. Bellingham would have probably made a huge difference in that last game of the season because he was so good. 14 goals in 42 games. He won the Kepa Trophy as the best young player in Europe finally, and he finished top 20 in the Ballon d'Or. So it wasn't really a surprise that Real Madrid wanted him.
Yeah, it would have been perfect for him to go out with that league title. And it's still, this got nothing to do with Bellingham or transfers, but it's a day that still haunts the club. Losing the title on that last day, and knowing him and knowing the kind of player that he is, it must have been terrible for him. I mean, I think he was on the bench, but it was clear that he wouldn't be playing, so he must have watched from the bench as the team not threw away, that would be too harsh a term, but just everybody and the pressure just got to the team. Everybody just assumed it was a foregone conclusion they would beat Mainz and win the league. And so in a way, it might have been too perfect for him to, that perfect player, who comes in as a young age, does everything right, becomes an international, and so on and so on. Would have been maybe too perfect to then go out with the league title. That's what Klopp always said when he sort of lost his final game was a cup final, which he lost. And he then said it would have been too much, too romantic, too perfect, too good. So maybe the same could be said here.
Maybe he needed to lose the title to get that adversity and spur him on to being an even better player.
Yeah, but he's the kind of player. I don't think he doesn't need any incentive. He doesn't need anything to be even more hungry. I mean, yeah, maybe one day. I mean, he's going to probably want to win tons of silverware with Real over the years. So maybe one day, but not. I think that wasn't the danger. There was no danger of him becoming complacent or whatever.
So what's the opinion of Jude Bellingham now, the 2025 Jude Bellingham from Borussia Dortmund and its fans?
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. I've said a number of times now that he was the perfect player and the perfect signing, and he wasn't quite that perfect anymore towards the end because he'd gotten. It's not that he did anything wrong, but I think he'd become aware of how good he is. And there was this moment when he scored for England. This last gasp goal at the was it at the Euros or whatever, where we I think it was turning around and mouthing who else. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
Yes.
We saw, of course,
Irish people definitely remember that.
Yeah. So
he could have played for us.
I think that was the moment where a lot of Dortmund fans went, he would never have done that during his first years at the club, but his last year prepared us for that because there were quite a few moments during games when his body language was saying, "I'm better than those guys." He was when somebody when somebody would lose the ball or not play it to him or these are things that you just don't do. You just don't throw your hands in the air as if you're saying, God, why didn't you do this? Or, why didn't you run into space? And there weren't many moments, but for such a young player, there were one or two too many. So, plus, of course, which is a characteristic of Borussia Dortmund, we know that the young players are going to leave. We do like them. We do like them also because they're young, but we're never going to attach too much emotions to them because we know not everybody leaves as quickly as Dembele, but they will leave in 2 or 3 years and earn the club a lot of money. So there was a lot of respect for Bellingham. everybody, everybody had a lot of respect for Bellingham and the kind of player that he was. But it wasn't as if it was, a dramatic loss to us. We felt that, he's going to take the next step. And that's what players do. They play for us, and then they play for Man City or Barcelona or Real Madrid. That's, of course, now looking back, there was no reason for him, to then play us in the Champions League final and win it with Real, his first time around. That hurt.
Yeah, that one's got to hurt. But getting to the Champions League final that season was an incredible accomplishment for Borussia Dortmund post Bellingham, and hopefully many more to continue, many more to come. Maybe with Bellingham too.
Yeah, but that season when we reached the Champions League final was almost the same season that we've played now. Disastrous in the Bundesliga, very good in the Champions League, and then, this time we didn't quite get to the final. But there were a couple of great games in Europe, especially beating Barcelona at home. But this team is no longer the team that Bellingham played for. It's lost quality over the last 2-3 years. It's changed. The club's approach has changed. We no longer sign Bellinghams. We sign established Bundesliga players. And it's not quite worked out the last couple of years. One theory is that the current sporting director, business manager, however you want to call him, former player Sebastian Kehl, is by nature a more cautious executive. So he tends to not, to not sign untried young players, but to sign, name players. Another theory is that maybe those players aren't out there anymore. Who knows? Maybe there's just a sudden dearth of talent. But in any case, the club are now trying to turn this around and address this problem, and to become the Borussia Dortmund of, 2016, until 2020 or 21 again. And whether signing Bellingham's brother is the first step into that direction or not, I don't know. He's a bit older than Jude was at the time. He's good, but is he as good? I don't know. And
is anybody?
Excuse me?
Is anybody as good?
Yeah, is anybody as good? And it's also that, like I said earlier, some people feel that bringing back players has never been a good idea for Dortmund. And of course, we're not bringing back the same player, but a lot of people feel that, do we really have to sign his brother now? I'm not quite sure about this. It's also because I've heard that he was initially reluctant to go to Dortmund because, that he's not, carrying the name Bellingham on his shirt, because he's reluctant to, live in his brother's shadow and just follow in his footsteps. So, but we talked him into it, and now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so Borussia Dortmund obviously still has that sway in bringing young players. Sebastian Kehl just needs to realise that's what he needs to do more of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks very much for your time today, Uli. I hope that you enjoyed it and our listeners and viewers enjoyed it. And thanks very much for listening. So you've been listening to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, please follow, share and rate us. Your support helps us bring you more news, analysis and insight. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter and Blue Sky address is at TransfersCast. Our production is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production, and our music is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
We did the transfer window. Ian McGarry, who left us and wasn't known for a couple of years. Duncan was low. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. one's gone gold.